Photography Club. So what is Quantic Photography Club? Quantic Photography Club was a club that I applied for and got. Um, I had to, like with all clubs and companies and countries, you have to have a thesis, you have to have um, a center of gravity, a sell. You have to sell something that's new. So, like I had mentioned, I'm pretty sure is that I sold Quantic Photography Club. And first off, I take a bunch of pictures, so it's easy to be for me to evangelize photography. You'll hear me talk about selfies, CGI, AI, um, movies. Um, so, I if you were to look at my Instagram, there's tons of photographs. I talk with my family about photographs when so that's kind of it makes it easy, it makes the hard work easy. um so I sold Quantic Photography Club to a woman who I met in Chicago. But seriously, I mean, there you could have any club. There was a really cool entrepreneurship club. There were a few other clubs that I tried to go to. So this then what happens is in the coursework, there's just there's this coursework basically like at regular colleges that you just audit. They're just fun courses. It's called like coffee. So one of them was photography. And so when you look at curriculum at colleges, it's about planning, but it's also about, you know, what can I take? What can I get away with? And so when I saw photography, I was like, oh, I'm sitting, I work remotely, I've had back problems. In photography, there's light. Obviously, there's light issues in remote work. And then if you think about remote work, my God, it's like one team's meeting to another team's meeting. The audio doesn't work. Your house Wi-Fi goes out, and there's nothing you can do about it. You go to the coffee shop, and your boss gets mad at you, and you have no idea why, except it doesn't make sense to go to the coffee shop. You there's a million issues with remote work. So that's why photography I thought would help remote work, especially the click. Um, the cliche, the click, when something clicks, you really understand something. So like you really have to respect technology. Can't say I do, but it's not that different than cleaning your room, brushing your teeth. So this is from the coursework. Our final principle involves the rule of thirds, right? So I'm not really sure what it means, but generally, if you look at this, this is halfway. That's called the horizon, right? So, down here, like maybe this should go up here. This is art and perception, illustration of the rule of thumb, for instance. Um, in golf, you see the way the wind's going by throwing a blade of grass. Um, so, if it's circular, saliency. What's salient, right? So if it's circular, it's the idea that it's circular. If there's patterned colors, it's it's just a distraction. So I like this one. Which one do you like? Libby likes that one. So this was kind of the thesis. Yes. How does it impact posture? As far as photography, it's incredibly difficult, right? You have to go in the field. We act like everyone has a camera, but it's pretty hard to take pictures to post them. I call them deadlifts, like dead leg lifts. Like you have to share it, you have to copy and paste it. If you consider, you know, um, you have to make decisions. So yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining. So this is a short one that I made. Like I said, they gave me this logo. I made it myself. This is Andromeda. So through a cubist lens, we identify, what is zoom, right? We identify commonplace assumptions in the act of taking a photograph. Oval, or spectacular. The thesis is that improvements in perception of shape, order, sense, hand-eye coordination, um, speed are associated with improvements in Quantic smart cases and exams. Um, this is mine. I took photographs and I improved the same case study from 73% to 92%. Aspect ratio. One theory I have is to just leave it, right? You take the photograph, and the way to stand out in the age of filters is to leave it Baroque, just leave it the color it is. But I really like Clarendon. So, it's hard to find exactly, a style. But again, it can be subjective. It can be subjective. So usually the photograph, right? Clouds are a really good example. You might see a plane, you might see a plane in the clouds, whatever that is to you. And certainly Schopenhauer loved the clouds. You can see it in his hair. And you might see a target, like a smoke target or whatever, a halo. And then when you take the picture, you definitely cannot see it. And that's like abstract art. So it's really difficult. So what you see, that's why like galleries are cool, where you get to ask questions. So that was the second basis of the thesis, was to have galleries. Lines are not edge based, they are not formal declarations of space, but infinite and spatial and not necessarily special. Lines lead to photograph deformation, limitation, and central distancing. My first kind of wow, I'm a great artist in New York City was when I started lifting the camera up and tilting it. So there's two things. One is when I have a picture, the f- one is good. So when I have a picture, do you have to be strong? Can you see someone's strength in the photograph, right? And does it stand out because of that? So in that perspective, what I do is I'll have a picture and I'll lift the camera up over my head and try to keep the same thing as when it was at my belly button. And that is really hard. So one is horizon, two is height, and then third is, so I would lift it up and then I would tilt it up like at the clouds, and I would take a picture, and New York City would just remind me of a chess set. So it looked like there's a rook, there's a queen, there's a bishop. So it got kind of weird though. So this is Joe DiMaggio. I sh- I tell the truth. It's actually called the ontology, which is a word we've been working on, and it's tough. It's tough. I don't know if you've seen this picture. Have you seen anyone that looks like this in the papers? Words like proportion, symmetric, they're not just to the image. We can see a larger right eye than a left eye. Physical strength in the chin, right? The cheek muscle, the Bostoning nova. It is still, I would say it's in thirds, right? One, two, three. One triangle, two triangles, three triangles. To preserve artificially stuff. Thank you.